what's the difference between a contract and a promise? You needn't say anything. Just ponder it, would you? What's the difference between a contract and a promise? And which of the two is more like Jesus? Now, here's something Paul wrote to an early church in Rome. If you're a hard worker, Paul wrote, and you do a good job, you deserve your pay. We don't call your wages a gift. But if you see that the job is too big for you, it's something only God can do, and you trust God to do it, you could never do it for yourself no matter how hard or how long you worked, well, that trusting Him to do it is what gets you set right with God, by God. Sheer gift. Now, if those who get what God gives them only by doing everything they are told to do and filling out all the right forms properly signed, all that eliminates personal trust completely and turns a promise into an ironclad contract. That's not a holy promise. That's a business deal. For a contract drawn up by a hard-nosed lawyer with plenty of fine print only makes sure that you are never able to collect. But if there is no contract, if there's no contract in the first place, simply a promise, and God's promise at that, you can't break it. This is why the fulfillment of God's promise depends entirely on trusting God. God's promise arrives as pure gift. That's the only way everyone can be sure to get in on it. Those who keep the religious traditions and, well, those who have never heard of them. For Abraham is the father of us all. He's not our human father. That's reading the story backwards. Abraham is our faith father. Yeah. Well, so ends that portion of his letter. And speaking of Abraham, I think most of us remember the patriarch formerly known as Abram, along with his wife Sarai, or Sarah. And they got quite a story. Yeah, reread the story sometime. It's Genesis chapters 12 through 18. Yeah, and I'll guarantee you, if you haven't read it lately, you'll be impressed. It's a story of less than perfect behavior, but also one of promise and even God's gift, God's sheer gift, to the point they'd become the parents of a multitude, including a nation with whom God would establish, well, a contract. Or was it a promise? The Ten Commandments, I mean. You know, with all those other laws, the first 5 books of Moses, from Exodus to Deuteronomy. I don't know, someone tried to count them. It was over 600. Hard to keep it all straight. Hence the need for folks like Nicodemus, a religious lawyer, if you will, who, though he was well-versed in the law and well-versed in contracts, he found it mightily, even spiritually, attracted to the teachings of Jesus. And he found it hard or impossible to accept what Jesus said, fascinated as he was, about being born from above or simply born again, like we just read, right? Because as Nicodemus, well trained in the law, I mean, he essentially asked, could it really be that easy? Could it really be a gift? Frankly, I've struggled with this too. Like you? I mean, do we really feel good enough to be loved as we are? I mean, religious or not, folks need to feel special, wanted, needed. And it's why churches like ours are oh so important. For, well, we've got it written down in the worship aid. Even if someone's knocking at the door. Right? We affirm God's gift every time we worship, right? We've got it in black and white. We've got it on the screens. It's the gift of being welcome. It's the gift of being needed. It's the gift of being special, like God is in Jesus. Now, speaking of God, weren't we? As God is in Jesus, it can be easy to overlook that Jesus, like us, was both young at heart and a crybaby, too. I mean, he cried when he was a baby, right? He cried when he was hungry. He cried when he was tired. He cried for all of his friends, and he cried about us. For how did he say it? In the Gospel of Matthew? Jerusalem, Jerusalem, murderer of prophets, killer of the ones who brought you God's news. Oh, how often I've ached to embrace your children the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you wouldn't let me. And now you're so desolate. You're nothing but a ghost town. What is there left to say? Only this: I'm out of here soon. The next time you see me, you'll say, oh, God has blessed him. He's come bringing God's rule. God's rule. God's rule is God's law of love that is truly, simply God's gift. Something we barely have words for, or don't have words for. As when a baby or child is born or adopted, the parents will recall how at that moment I held my baby, that I held my baby in my arms, or when we signed all the papers that made them our own. It was at that moment everything changed. Can I get a witness? It's moments like those when words simply fail us and the tears start to fall. When our questions hold the answers. Here I'm reminded of that guy on TV. Maybe you remember this too. We can still watch the reruns, about this tough-talking, bald-headed detective named Koepcke. Right? Anybody? Am I aging myself? Yes. Koepcke, he had a fondness for lollipops. Yeah. And he had a funny way to say it, or rather to ask it. Maybe you remember, huh? He'd look him in the eye and he'd say, "Who loves you, baby?" Who loves you, baby? Who indeed? Well, it doesn't take a great detective to discover that it's God. God, who was born as a baby, just like us, born as baby Jesus, who would live a life like ours, sometimes hungry or fearful or needing some love, and more to the point, who loved us all first. So God really knows and wants us to remember that God's gift, God's sheer gift of life is a promise, not a contract. It's a gift for us all that we need not work out, but simply accept and so truly believe.